Hi. Hi, you guys. Okay. Yesterday, we left off. Let me see. Let me check my volume. Let me see if everything is fine. Give me a second. Give me a second. Okay. Hi. Hi, you guys. Give me a second. Okay, it's working. Second. It's working. Can you guys share? Can you guys share so that this broadcast reaches as many people as possible? And we learn and, get to know about a great guy who happens to be my father. And I guess this is my way of honoring him in a way and sharing with you the experience and also learning, which is the most important bit of it. So if you don't have the book, that's the book. If you wish to get the book, there is the book. If you're in Uganda, it's available in Aristoc and at Hotel Africana. I'm yet to tell you guys how you can get it via Amazon. Okay? So yesterday we left off at chapter 2. I'm going to start with chapter 2. And I'm going to be going, So chapter 2. You let me know if the volume is fine. Okay? Let's go. Chapter 2. Singled out for business. As I headed back to Masaka at the end of 1966, I left behind many childhood friends that I had made in Butambala. Though with some of them, the separation would be temporary as we were yet to reconnect and they would remain lifelong friends. Some were in play key roles in my journey of success as our paths crossed again sooner and others later. When my father sent me to school in another county far from home at such an early age, I did not realize then that he was preparing me for a life of diversity, which I have led in many different lands where I have worked and lived. In any case, I was already a product of footloose ancestors, and I have explained about my mother's parentage. Growing up as her firstborn and confidant when I returned to Masaka from Butambala aged about 13, she started discussing with her, we started discussing with her the vital plans of my life. My father, Haji Ali Kibirige, was already a prominent businessman in the 1940s before he met my mother. Earlier in 1944, he had built a restaurant in Masaka town located on plot 6 Budu Street and named it Nachito Hotel after his daughter, my eldest sister. Even today, in the local vernacular, restaurants are referred to as hotels. We still have Nachito Hotel's postal address, PO Box 384 Masaka. My father also owned trucks for transporting coffee and other merchandise. I do remember some trucks of his coffee and merchandise. I do remember some trucks of his that included a Bedford and Albion, a Ford commercial lorry, and a Dodge pickup. He employed several drivers for the trucks. He did not, however, have a personal driver. He always drove himself. My father always preferred to drive British models, as I at least remember his Zephyr and a Zodiac in particular. Of all his commercial vehicles, he seemed to have cherished the red Albion so much because I recall the day he received it. He took us with my brothers for celebration in Masaka town, where we enjoyed iced sweets that were in vogue those days. I must have missed out a lot on the fun of my father's trucks while I was going to school in Butambala. But on returning to Masaka, the intended pursuit of academic excellence did not take immediate priority. My father, who was a fully fledged businessman and trader, decided to involve me temporarily in a coffee trade at Chiriasaka, Chibinge in Budu County. I had three elder brothers, but somehow our father did not involve them in the business and instead recruited me. We could even say he conscripted me into trading. I was barely 14 years old, and as far as I remember, there was no other teenager among my new colleagues, the traders with whom I bought and sold Kakuta Kamu fresh coffee beans before they were dried in the gineries in Chibinge. I got a chance to meet rich people like the Kalodo family, who were successful at the time, and my good friend Kasim Muyondo, with whom I am still very close to this day. My mom was running a retail shop at our home, and I got to see some of the challenges of retail trade then, including the expiry of her merchandise before she sold it, and then the little money she would get once she sold her wares off. She sold her wares off one by one. Unlike in the coffee trade, where I would get profits on the same day, mom had to wait to sell her stock. In the coffee business, my father and I had built trust and relationships with farmers to the extent of giving us coffee on credit, which we would sell for cash at the milling plants all over Budu. The same challenges I saw then are still prevalent today. It was at Chibinge, while I traded in coffee, that I first made a profit that fascinated me. In the commodity trade of this nature, you buy and sell and earn your profit the very same day. Although my father was not paying me a salary and I did not need it in the first place, I found the trade I was doing for him so enjoyable that I did not wish for any other life. Besides, I was getting such a great training. Admittedly, I did not feel like going back to school again. Some people today would call it child labor. But for me, I was enjoying myself immensely. Besides, I was learning. And it turns out that my father was giving me a great advantage over other children who were still staying in school full time. There was so much to learn, there was so much to do and learn, as my father also had a large coffee farm at Matanga at our home. Ooh. Guys, if you're just coming in, we're on chapter 2, Singled Out for Business. Please share and comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know what resonates, what is funny, what is not. The most important thing is that you share and learn something. Okay, I think I'm gonna get my pen because I need to highlight things that are okay. At the Matanga farm, I was responsible for measuring using a stick how much the workers who were digging uncovered in the week. This stick was commonly referred to as a yard, though in actual sense it was a scale longer than a yard. It was given to me by my father. He would put it on the ground to measure the size of the garden area one was to work on that day as an indentured laborer. The number of yards covered determined how much they were paid. They paid every week. I was good with mathematics and I immensely enjoyed this work. I struck a friendship with the workers who were mainly Bachiga and Rwandan refugees, and I would listen to their conversations all the time. But this did not take away my strictness towards work. We managed to find a balance between work and leisure. That's important. I got so engrossed in the business that the school term opened without my noticing immediately. My father did not seem to notice that schools had reopened either. He was busy with his other business, including running Nachito Hotel. While in Masaka, I used to hang out at Nachito Hotel, where I developed a deep interest in food stroke catering business. I would see the profits in catering and I liked what I saw. But for most of the time, I was busy making money for my father in the coffee trade. He was confident that I was completely honest, following the discipline he had instilled in me. Above all, the moral uprightness I got from Aunt Kevina. So my father knew his money was 100% safe with me. As such, he was not in a hurry to take me back to school either. During that year when I put school off, my father repeatedly told me three things that stuck in my head. I might not have realized then that he was giving me the key principles that would guide me in my business life for many decades, but I simply memorized them and have applied them automatically over the years. The first was never to spend business capital on consumption. Tokwatanga ku kaluge tokwatanga kukalugendo. Tokwatanga kukalugendo. Never touch the capital, he used to say in Luganda. He further emphasized it with the second lesson that I must never regard business I must never regard business money as mine, but should instead be content that the business, which owns that money, belongs to me, and it should be able to pay me enough salary that I need for my personal expenditure. Thirdly, he preached honesty in business. His teaching of honesty landed on fertile ground because that was one of the lessons Aunt Kevina had also emphasized every day and all the years I was under her care and upbringing. In connection with these three lessons, he preached expansion of the business through retention of profits for reinvestment in the business rather than consumption by the owner. Throughout my business life, I have found these three cardinal rules. Um, Give me a second. Maybe that's good. Throughout my business life, I have found these three cardinal truths invaluable, and I get pleasantly so there were three. The first one is don't eat the The first one was don't eat the capital. So don't never touch the capital. The second one is always reinvest in your business, like reinvest in it. Don't take out. And then the third one is honesty. Yes. Throughout, let me put a stamp. Throughout my business life, I have found these three cardinal rules invaluable, and I get pleasantly surprised whenever I encounter them in the different books I read on business and entrepreneurship, and when I hear them being postulated by prominent motivational speakers and presenters at the seminars and workshops I attend. On some occasions, I notice with satisfaction that these principles, which my father taught me at an early age, in whatever academic terminologies these acclaimed authorities, these acclaimed authors dress them, confirm that Haji Ali Kibirige indeed gave me the right foundation. I have been recognized in my country. I have been recognized in my country and around the world with different awards, which include an honorary doctorate and a National Heroes Medal because of my work and honesty, virtues I picked from my parents. These simple principles, uh, these simple principles are the same for all who want to succeed as entrepreneurs. That's why I dedicated this book to my late father, Ali Kibirige. For honesty, for instance, is what has worked for me. From Nairobi to Hong Kong, from Japan to United Arab Emirates, I have gained success by getting suppliers credit in my many pioneering projects. People give me suppliers credit because of my demonstrated honesty over the decades. This has been key factor in the growth of my enterprise in different countries and at home. I must, therefore, from the onset, salute my father, though now deceased, for these invaluable lessons which have enabled me to come this far. Of course, hearing these lessons and taking them seriously enough to abide by them are different things. Even some of my own relatives who learned them from the same source did not stick by them. And though I tried to work with them, we had to part ways at some point. Oh, back to school. If you're just joining, I'm reading this book, my father's book. This is the book. I'm reading it for the first time. Thanks for joining me. Hope you can learn something. And I'm on chapter 2, back to school. After a year of trading in coffee on a full-time basis, my parents thought it was finally time for me to return to school. I had returned to Masaka to go to P7, having completed P6 in 1966 in Butambala. But these teachers at Kadugala Primary School, which I joined in 1968, were not about to make things that easy. They said I had become so rusty after sitting at home for a year and insisted that I had to repeat primary 6. I did not like the idea, but my father agreed with them, and so back to P6 I went. I grudgingly walked the 4 kilometers from home in Matanga village to school in Kadugala every day. Surprisingly, I enjoyed this walk along with my siblings, even though sometimes my uncles, Haji Sabiti Kasuja, Haji Jamil Musisi, and Idi Basaja Valaba, who were in the taxi business, would give us a lift. My siblings and I were walking the 4 kilometers on tarmac. I enjoyed it because it enabled me to count vehicles that were taking coffee and matoke to Kampala. I remember the Kalodo trucks, the ones of Asumani Matovu from Barara and those that belonged to Masaka Cooperative Union. The trucks always had the names of their owners written on their doors. I was interested in them because I thought once I returned to trading, my trucks would be like those. The Kalodo family inspired me a lot. At this time, my father was under pressure from his friends who always asked him what happened to me and why was I not trading anymore. Like my father, they too had seen the potential businessman in me. Even though I owned a bicycle, I did not ride it to school. Looking back, I wonder how I survived accidents. This bicycle did not have brakes, so I used to put my foot either on the tire or on the ground to slow down or stop. Sometimes this was on tarmac roads. Probably the number of vehicles at the time helped, as there were fewer and the drivers were mostly careful. However, I developed sicknesses like chest pain because of the heavy load I used to push on the bicycle. The Bambi. To maximize profit, I used to carry more kilograms on the bicycle than my age would normally allow. Talking of sickness, I remember as a young man, I used to suffer a lot of malaria bouts, just like many people in rural areas. Uganda is in the tropics, so there are many potential mosquito breeding grounds all over our homes. At the time, there were no mosquito nets and these modern insect repellents. The treatment at the time was admission of chloroquine and nivaquine through injection. These drugs were highly effective in treating malaria, but they had a major side effect. As you started to heal, your body would itch, so you would not be able to sleep or do anything. You spent most of the time scratching yourself with your hands, wooden materials, combs, or whatever you could find. I hated it so much. In fact, that is not true. I hate it even today. You will not believe it, but when I fall sick today, the first thing I tell the doctor is not to give me chloroquine and Nivaquine. At that moment, I simply forget that these drugs are not even on the market any, anymore, as more effective ones have since been discovered. As I continued going to school, I kept wondering what the point of returning to formal education was. If it were if it were all to end up seeking employment to get some money after years of study, I could earn much more in business, which was already open for me. For I had for I had already made up my mind that I was going to be a businessman, and I already knew how to go about it. I had seen the money one could make out of trading, and my father had trained me. There was no way I was going to continue with school. The small remuneration that teachers earned was another source of discouragement that killed any enthusiasm for school. In business, we always relied on market intelligence and had to find out the prices of goods from the suppliers and in the markets. So naturally, I gathered information about the salaries of all the teachers at my school and was dismayed at the figures. An average teacher's salary was lower than the profit I could make for my father in a day's trading activity. The thought that I was expected to continue going to school for several more years only to end up earning a little money if I succeeded as a good student was simply agonizing. But I did not completely stop working during the 2 years that I was back in school. I used to work on the farm on Saturdays, Sundays, and during school holidays as a supervisor of the laborers, as explained already. What fascinated me about these Bachiga is that they all spoke English well, unlike local rural folks. It I liked the Bachiga workers and was good friends with them, spending most of my evenings in their company as most of them were quite youthful and we related easily. I vividly remember two young men then, Tivamwenda and Bitakanya, and I really wished I could meet them today. Many of the Bachiga laborers said they came from a place called Chisizi. Besides being besides being a foreman, I also engaged in coffee picking with my brothers. For 2 years, I just endured school, wearing school uniform and obeying all the school rules. In fact, I was a good boy and was a perfect during the first year, becoming the head prefect in the second year. When I recently saw my last born 7-year-old Muhammad Muanga, then taking oath for a prefect's position in his school, and then my granddaughter Tahani Omar also assuming elective office at her school at age of 5, I got the feeling that my attaining leadership was not accidental. Oh, how long have we been? Okay. During my last years in school, I remained exposed to the attractive profits of my father's businesses. At Nachito Hotel, for example, I witnessed the spikes you can enjoy in the hospitality industry during special occasions. When the Pope first visited Africa in the middle of 1969, Pope Paul the Fourth came to Uganda, and many people traveled from neighboring countries for the pilgrimage at Namugongo Mata's shrine near Kampala. Hundreds of the pilgrims from Tanzania, Congo, Rwanda, and Burundi stopped for food and refreshments at our Nachito Hotel in Masaka town. For quite a while, we never stopped serving the travelers who were passing day and night. It was the busiest 2 weeks I ever saw at Nachito. The amount we raked in from the pilgrims was so big I had never counted so much money in my trading life in such a short time. Oh, wow. Whew. I continued being subjected to this kind of exposure to money and business until I sat for my PLE at the end of 1969, passing reasonably well. In school, I had been good at math and I still value the mental work exercises we did every day when the teacher subjected us to making rapid calculations in our heads and giving the verbal answers as fast as we could. I still do rapid computations by head during business transactions and planning sessions and let my amazed partners confirm my figures using calculators and computers. This is something I am proud of from my brief school experience. If I had continued with school after primary level, I would most likely have ended up as a good technician in Uganda Electricity Board, following in the footsteps of my bigger cousin, Eddie Chibirige, who was then the most qualified school leaver in our extended family. Being a good technician at UEB was one childhood dream I had nurtured briefly before I became fascinated with business and profits. But business was beckoning, and I was back at it during the long vacation after PLE, which was supposed to last 3 months, but which for me, I apparently still going on for 50 years later. Chapter 3: Becoming My Own Man. After we're going. Okay, let me get. Mhm. Let me put this here. Yes. Okay, this looks better. Okay. Becoming my own man. After primary 7, my father took me to Masaka Technical College to do an interview, which I passed. But when time for reporting came, I refused to go. I refused to go and said I just wanted to employ myself. It was a bold decision which my father respected. At the end of 1969, which was also my final year of school, a tragedy struck which opened to me a side of my father that I had not known before. The Kabaka, the king of Buganda, Edward Mutesa II, died in exile in England that November. There was no immediate prospect of a successor being installed on the throne to lead his Baganda people. Since 3 years earlier, he had been overthrown when his Mengo palace was attacked by the army commanded by Colonel Idi Amin. His kingdom had subsequently been abolished by Apollo Milton Obote, who imposed himself on the country as president. The news of Mutesa's death struck my father so deeply, and he never fully recovered from the shock. He ordered a week-long mourning for the whole family. He summed up the tragedy in a figurative Luganda phrase thus: Tulabye namunswa, tulabye. Namunswa afudde mu kiswa. Literally meaning the queen ant was no longer in the ant hill. This implied that the end of the centuries of old Buganda kingdom. We closed all business activity and went to the compound of one Mr. Kaja, who had been a sub-county chief further away at Buwama, where we joined with other grief-stricken people in mourning for a week. As a regional administrator in the kingdom, Mr. Kaja was a loyal servant of the king and rejoined many other kingdom subjects to mourn in his home. For a teenager, the Kabaka's death may not have hurt me as much as it did my father, but it awoke me to the depth of which beliefs that people hold dear can run. With this ingrained in me, I am always instinctively sensitive and respectful to other people's cultures in the numerous places where I have traded and invested my energy and money over the past half century. Okay, this is interesting because this is interesting. It's really loaded. I need to come back to some of these. And since then, I have also been a strong believer and supporter of the Buganda monarchy. Although I have for long been known to the current Kabaka, His Majesty Ronald Mwenda Mutebi II, I only told him about my father's story after he was crowned as king, and he was really touched by the depth of love people have for their monarchy. For the whole of 1970, it was trade for my father, who this time deployed me beyond our home country of Budu, later known as Masaka district, to as far as Chikagati in western Uganda. I mostly traded in agricultural produce, especially coffee, maize, beans, and other grains. The profit we made was unbelievable. I personally was not getting paid any salary for the job I did for my father, but I did not need the money either, since he was taking care of all my needs and I was learning valuable lessons in business as my young, fresh brain was taking in everything. Besides, while I did my father's business, moving truckloads of grains across central and western regions of the country, I was doing some small trade in bananas for myself and saving the small proceeds. I would put the banana bunches on these trucks. These I now imagine, when I now imagine what I was doing at that age, I feel proud and grateful that indeed I was gifted. Nachito Hotel was my main client for the cooking bananas locally called matoke. Besides using my father's trucks, my uncle Rashid Cheyune also owned Chotera bus services. I would sometimes board these buses and put my matoke on the truck, thereby ensuring I always had my supplies in the market. At the restaurant, I mastered the food business. This is how my interest in the catering and hospitality industry started. It is my core business to date. I was also supplying matoke to other restaurants in Masaka town, and since there was no need for me to spend any of my money, I started the process of saving my little money for capital accumulation. It was so much. My turnover was 20 to 30 bunches of matoke, but it was a good start and a perfect training base. At the beginning of 1970s, another major event occurred in Uganda. To most people, it came as a joyous moment. On Monday morning of January 25th, 1971, everybody noticed that the country's then sole radio station, Radio Uganda, was not transmitting its normal programs. Those days, the radio played a vital role in people's lives as the only mass media available across the country free of charge. It was the source of official news, and most people in the villages could only tell the time of the day by listening to the radio. It was their chronometer because it transmitted given programs unfailingly and punctually all day long. Because Uganda never developed a national language, Radio Uganda broadcast in all 17 major language groups of the country, and everybody everywhere in the country knew the specific time when the program in their language would be broadcast. But that Monday morning, Radio Uganda was only playing martial music. By mid-morning, everybody knew that there was fighting in the capital, Kampala, courtesy of the passenger service vehicles locally called taxis. There were small commuter buses that plied all major roads every day, connecting to Masaka, capital city, which lies 128 kilometers north of my hometown of Masaka. The first taxis started returning without accessing the city, having turned back due to the heavy fighting. Finally, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a tough commanding voice came on air and interpreted the martial music that had been playing non-stop since morning, saying it in English. Will you stand by for a special announcement? I have a message for you from my fellow soldiers. The message reads: it has been necessary to take action and save a bad situation from getting worse. The military announcement proceeded to declare a coup d'etat, enumerating 18 reasons why the army had decided to overthrow the civilian government of Dr. Apollo Milton Obote. Key among the reasons was the rising insecurity, lack of democracy, nepotism, and personalization of the army, of the army, of the army, of the army. Thousands of people poured onto the streets of many urban areas, especially in in the central region, which had been under emergency rule since the overthrow of the kingdom of 5 years earlier. The celebrations went on the whole night, and even as normal activity resumed the following day, the joyous mood continued as people celebrated the new freedom. My father was among those who overjoyed and kept saying, Tuwonyeka wenkene, we are finally free from the scourge. This in reference to Milton Obote, who Idi Amin had overthrown. Hundreds of people who had been held in prison without trial were released. Among those freed Baganda royals, including the revered Prince Badru Kakungulu and Princess Narinya Ndagire, county chiefs Aba Masaza, 5 cabinet ministers who had been arrested in a cabinet meeting 5 years earlier and opposing politicians. Soon after, the government returned the body of Edward Mutesa II, the Baganda king who had died in exile in London in November 1961. Baganda's love for President Amin increased. The economy was stable, and the Indian business class, who had earlier been apprehensive by government threats to nationalize many businesses, felt reassured after the takeover. With the new government enjoying such goodwill of the country's central region and the business class, there was little reason to expect the economic disaster that was to come at the close of 1972, when the so-called economic war that kicked off with seizing the businesses of all Asians was declared. Idi Amin Dada had seized power through a military coup on January 1971, January 25th, when when he deposed his boss Apollo Milton Obote, who was attending a Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting conference in Singapore. Once Amin announced his takeover on Radio Uganda, Kampala residents were jubilant. The Baganda, including my relatives, were now happy that Uganda's enemy, number one, had finally been removed from power. They did not blame Amin much for commanding the attack on the Lubiri, because he was acting on behalf of Kawenkene Obote. To most Baganda, Obote was nicknamed Kawenkene, which is Luganda for an ungrateful traitor. Amin was a populist par excellence. His first major attempt at the populism was in the address that he gave to justify the coup. He cited 18 points as shown below. The first point, the unwarranted detention without trial for long periods of many people, many of whom are totally innocent. The continuation of state of emergency over the whole country for an indefinite period, which is meaningless to everybody. The lack of freedom in the airing of different views of political and social matters. The frequent loss of life and property arising from almost daily activities of robbery with violence and condoism, which is thuggery, without strong measures being taken to stop them. Whew. The proposals for national service, which will take every able-bodied person from his home to work in a camp for 2 years, could only lead to more robbery and several crimes when homes are abandoned. While widespread corruption in high places, especially among ministers and top civil servants. The failure by the political authorities to organize any elections for the last 8 years where the people's free will would be expressed. Economic policies have left many people unemployed and even more insecure and lacking in the basic needs of life. Number 9, high taxes have left the common man of this country poorer than ever before. Number 10, the prices which the common man gets for his crops, like cotton and coffee, have not gone up, whereas the cost of food, education, etc., has always gone up. Uh, the Defense Council, number 13. Wait. Number 11, the tendency to isolate the country from East African unity. Number 12, the creation of a wealthy class of leaders who are always talking of socialism while they grow richer and the common man poorer. Number 13, the Defense Council, of which the president is chairman, has not met since July 1969, and this has made administration of the armed forces very difficult. Number 14, the Cabinet Office, by training large numbers of people, largely from the Okororo country in Lango district, where Obote and Akena Odoko, the Chief General Service Officer, came from, in armed warfare has been turned into a second army. Number 15, the Lango Development Master Plan, written in 1967, decided that all key positions in Uganda's political, commercial, and army and industrial life must be occupied and controlled by people from Akororo County, Lango District. Obote, on the advice of Akena Adoko, had sought to divide the Uganda Armed Forces and the rest of Uganda by picking out his own tribesmen and putting them in key positions. It is a shock, number 17. It is a shock to us to see that Obote wants to divide and downgrade the army by turning it into cabinet office. Number 18, we all want only unity in Uganda and we do not want bloodshed. Everybody in Uganda knows that. The matters mentioned above appear to us to lead to a bloodshed only. With most Ugandans still taking in the euphoria of Amin's takeover and more so Obote's overthrow, the military leader announced that he would return the remains of Kabaka Mutesa II, who had died in London in 1971. Just 2 months after the coup, the Baganda lined up on the streets to welcome the king's remains to be properly buried at the Kasubi Royal Tombs, like three of his predecessors, Mutesa I, Mwanga II, and Daudi Chwa. By this time, Amin was enjoying immense popularity. This popularity was not to last forever, though. Although Idi Amin had given all those reasons for the coup, He did not have the ability to properly run the country. Issues of statecraft were foreign to him, so he was always on the lookout for the next popular thing to do. In 1972, Amin declared an economic war where he gave 90 days to foreigners who did not possess Ugandan citizenship to leave. This specifically targeted Indians and some British nationals. The Asians, the Asians had been beneficiaries. The Asians had been beneficiaries of British colonialism and they enjoyed most trading opportunities. Because most of them were involved in trade, some of them cheated people of their produce, such as coffee and cotton, through use of weighing systems, which Africans did not fully understand. Amin was aware that Ugandans did not love these Asians, so he asked them to leave and nationalize their assets by doling them out to these henchmen and regime zealots. The new owners of these shops did not understand the basics of the businesses they were inheriting, which caused unprecedented scarcity of most essential goods, as we will discuss later. Subheading: Business in the Big City. The new rulers, the men in uniform, were feted as we have seen above the 1971 coup. They liked this so much that they forgot to return to their barracks. Later that year, President Amin came to Masaka, arriving by helicopter, and people excited went to welcome him at the famous Tropical Inn Hotel, then under Uganda Hotels Corporation. My brother, Jingo Chibirige, broke through the crowd and approached the president and got a handshake from him. He did not wash for a week for fear of losing the blessings from touching the then hero. It was during the excitement of the military takeover, which lasted over a year, that I first ventured into Kampala to try my hand at business in the big city. I had made my maiden trip to Kampala 2 years earlier, but was then accompanied by my grandmother as we traveled for the last funeral rites of a relative, the wife of my uncle Abdul Matovu, and late mother, my cousin Yusuf Matovu, a prominent businessman popularly known as Yoma. It had been a brief journey as we passed through Kampala en route to Kisibe village on Kapeka Road in Nakaseke, where the funeral rites functions were taking place. But this time it was a business trip from which I was not to return for several years. I was heading to Kampala, where the real business action was. During a low trading season in Masaka and Kikagati in 1971, I approached my father and he did not object to my casual request to go to the city and visit a few relatives. What he did not know was that this was a deep conspiracy between me and my mother, who was my confidant, that I relocate permanently to Kampala. I did the same thing. In my private discussion with her, Mommy told me that I had already learned a lot there, that I had already learned all that there was to learn in Masaka as far as business was concerned, and that it was time for me to go out and face the world like a man. Nor was I ready to go back to school after tasting the joy of trading and making money. I will forever be grateful to her for the encouragement and for believing in my potential. She reinforced my confidence and strengthened my determination to succeed. I had only a small mattress given to me by my maternal grandmother as my possession as I entered Kampala city to start a new life. On this account, I praise my mother who allowed me to go and live with Aunt Kevina at a very tender age and then supporting me to go and do business in Kampala. I am the firstborn, so I believe it was not easy to let me go. But she had the guts to do it. I think it was brave on her part. I had been in contact with Abdul Sozi, a friend from my Kadugala primary school days. Though he was studying at Kadugala in Masaka, he was from Kampala and had been traveling to the city regularly. He expressed willingness to take me to Kampala, and it was with him that I made the journey to the city. Abdul Sozi. Okay. Our first stop was at the home of Abdul's brother, Mr. Kakembo, in Natete suburb, which was to be my home in Kampala for the first 2 or 3 months. Kakembo was renting a two-room unit, and he obviously slept in his bedroom, while Abdul and I turned his living room unit, his two was renting two-room unit, and he obviously slept in okay. For a teenager who was who was venturing into the city for the first time, this was perfectly okay. Living with good people whom I could trust at my exploratory age stage in a new environment. I salute Mr. Kakembo for providing my first home in Kampala at no cost. Thank you, Mr. Kakembo, whoever you are. Thank you. Kakembo was trading in dry fish at Nachivubo, a busy market area near the National Football Stadium in the city center. With his brother Sozi, they were like my own siblings. Their sister Nasanga was married to a butcher, and during the first couple of months, as I got acclimatized to the city, I helped around the fish and butchery business. By the second month, I had studied the business environment enough to make my first investment decision in Kampala. Handcuts. I bought several handcuts. I think handcuts gari, right? Like the chigari pushing. I bought several cuts, which were required in the market areas to carry heavy merchandise around, and hired them out at 1 shilling per day to men operating in the Tete area. That is how I first entered the transport business, buying and equipment which I could afford at the time. Had I known how far I could come, I would have written BMK on those handcuts, for that was my first entry into transport, into the business of moving heavy goods for people. I continued to do the meat business while my cats also fetched me a reasonable daily income. For a teenager, I was not doing badly, and I moved out of Kakembo's Natete house and rented my first room also in Natete. I was already getting restless with the small time businesses, which I think by this time he was like 17 or something. I think. I was doing with the circle of friends. Compared with what I had been doing for my father in Masaka, what we were doing now is in a much bigger city was like kids play. It was during this time that I met Muhammad Kaye, my childhood friend from Butambala, who told me that he was in the meat business. Kaye explained to me how it worked and showed me the profits he was making. His supplier was Joseph Butika, a wealthy dealer who would get his meat from the abattoir and supply his agents, including Kaye. Kaye served butcheries in Chisenyi and Katwe and would get his profits each day. He invited me to join him. This is important. Don't be stingy with your knowledge. Sharing is caring. We can know it. I told Abdu and Kakembo about my next move and agreed that my ideas were bigger than theirs. So they watched and waited to see how things would go for me. Things became immediately better. Working with Kaye, I was operating at a bigger scale and earning better. I started getting to know the city life better. I remember one of my first friends in Kampala was Ayub Kalule, with whom I used to hang out in the evenings. Kalule went on to become a very successful boxer, becoming the first Ugandan to win a world professional boxing title. So here we have pictures. Let me put this down. It's tiring. I'm supposed to be here for an hour. So, okay. That's that's his father. That's my grandfather. Do we look alike? Yeah, that's my grandfather. Ona, thy father. My father, the late Ali Chibirige. Then these are pictures from 1978. His first house in Kansanga. He was here carrying stuff on the street. I don't know how old that was. I have this picture of him with the handbag trading. I have this photo. This one. Hmm. Okay. These are photos. That is him and his mom, my granny. Yeah. So I will meet you guys next time for part 3. We'll be starting with chapter 4. And yeah, so we've done 3 chapters so far. I don't want this to be long. I want to be doing 1 hour every day. So if you haven't seen from the beginning, you can rewind. Yesterday I did the part 1. You can go listen to it. Please share, like, comment, and if you want the book, if you're in Uganda, it's in Aristoc and you can find it at Hotel Africana. And I will be letting you guys know how you can order it off of Amazon. So thanks for watching. I hope this did something for you. I hope you learned something, and I hope it was interesting for you. So I'll stop here and have a nice day. Bye. I didn't cry today. Yay!